It's just made for like Zoom meetings and
Yeah,
stuff
yeah.
like that. So you just gotta
I
go out
just,
there.
yeah, it's something that like we talked about, like people are open to me getting someone to do it, which is nice. But yeah, I just don't want to have to think about it. It's a lot to manage on my own. Like I like to just have like the things I'm good at that I can focus on when I can. And we just need to have more of a team, you know? So that's in the works.
Just you.
Yeah, exactly. So it's in the works, which I'm grateful for.
She did a whole thing. Just throws all this pollen around me. Why? And you really realize how much pollen it is after you have a large function shows right up. And you can tell which way one's going because which side of the card has 6 pollen. She doesn't.
But yes, something I will also address today.
Yes.
It's nice.
I really want you to incorporate that ceiling fan with the bottle somehow into a sermon. So we have to all stand up there blindfolded.
What's it?
You didn't see the video? I tagged you in it. So
I probably laughed at it then, but I don't remember.
I think you did. He's on break space.
No.
That's
I
fine.
do.
Are there assignments? Anybody have a cup of coffee? I'm gonna sign you. Sounds. Thank you. I like your hair. Yeah.
That was you. Okay.
Where were you?
I was sitting in the corner and I saw
Are we supposed to be right there?
We're all
Yeah.
still, yeah.
So what I said, Emily.
Okay, I did hear something and I said, okay. Good stuff.
Emily, I was go see Dr. Shree.
Oh, was it good? I'm excited. I saw it. Yeah.
It was
Somebody
so
did.
good.
Thank you.
And
Yeah, no, the parking lot was packed for taxis.
oh my God.
I drove and I was like, oh my goodness. So,
Oh yeah. So they have like 3 different movies coming on. We wound up seeing the 3.
I haven't been to the movies in like a while. I mean, I've been since the pandemic, but it's been a while. Because like all the movies got stalled from creating because of the pandemic. Like, they're not really creating. Well, the other thing though is it's more of a. Yeah. So you can bring a chair.
Yeah.
Just kind of, I mean, I don't know which walking space, just really like we're now taking.
Right.
Really high.
So
Yeah, right. And then just be like, you can make. We're gonna go back and forth, you can stop. No, that was me. That was me. Oh, yeah, we were there Friday.
Down in the bottom.
Yeah, I was eating all the bottom of
I do not like them, so they were going to be.
They're good. Like, that's what I go to here. Fred Robin, for the bottom.
Or you could just be
My
the.
first time going to 50 rounds.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was
So many options. It's smaller than a lot of restaurants. It's nice.
delicious. It's good to go back.
Yeah, no, it was good. I got the, I never tried the chips. They have chips there. You can order bottomless chips too. Really? Yeah, they're like homemade chips. No, they're thin, but they're potato chips. But they're not as good as the fries. So I got the chips. Wes got the fries, and I ate the fries and it's fine. I forgot to do that.
work. That in cities.
Cindy gave us $20. Great.
No, Greg needs to go.
Yeah.
No, you come to- I'm like, where are you going?
Who are you there with?
I was with my friend Andrea.
Okay.
I know.
It's all, I go to Marvel together.
It's a very different place.
Pandemic.
She's like, I ate too much yesterday for salad.
And then I got home and got sick. That's right.
So. So we got-
Yeah.
So we ended up going
Sorry I missed you.
Tuesday.
It's okay, I was rushing him
We ended up-
to hurry up and finish eating, so that we go to a movie, and then I wanted to be in the one that was late eating. So he was sitting there waiting for me, and then I had to wait for him, because while when I was finished, I went to the car, and he's like, oh, I'm gonna go to the bathroom. I'm like, why didn't you do that while I was eating? So we could just leave. So just, whatever.
Then I stocked up on my beer and then got her some cider and stuff like that.
Mother's Day, gentlemen. Hello, how are you? Hi, how are you? I'm good. Happy Mother's Day.
Does it feel farther back today?
Is that you, Brooke?
Like,
We can shuffle up.
I think there are more chairs, so yeah, probably.
I think there's 4 chairs.
Okay.
But normally we're by the poles.
Yeah.
okay, all right. For some reason, all right. Just my perception today. Like,
I'm
wow.
my assigned seat.
This is fair.
We're creatures of habit.
Yeah, maybe this is also pushback.
It
Yeah.
is, it
I
is
think that's what it
pushback.
is. Okay.
It's usually closer up to the poles.
Okay.
Speakers usually closer up.
All right. That makes sense. So I'm like,
Work is not us, it's you.
it's true. It's true.
I feel sorry. I give you these things
All right.
for free. And then I had to take 30 because I'm tested. And then I had to check these last week because I'm tested. And then I just put them in, I rearranged the tests again because they were already tested. And I have a not smart, like, literally the new seats again. I was like, yep, this should be it. So I was like, I probably won't change it.
It is stressful.
For the most part, it's I
All right. I think we'll get started here. Is that the wind?
I think it's
Okay, sounds good.
Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't know. It's resurrection season. We don't know what to expect. Exactly. So we don't know. We're open to the spirit in our midst. But good morning, Church on Main. It is a joy. It is a joy. There's a lot going on today, this week. It is still Mental Health Awareness Month. It is still the 4th Sunday of Easter, and it is Mother's Day. And so happy Mother's Day to all who recognize and celebrate on this day in various ways. And so we're just going to try our best to pull together many of the things that we're carrying today, all the feelings that may be coming up. And yeah, we're just going to journey together. There are a few announcements that I mostly mentioned last night, but one of the things coming up that we were able to secure was a date of May 23rd, a NAMI mental health workshop. And so that's going to be a workshop done by the folks there who are going to be doing some work teaching us about mental illness and how we as a faith community and as a wider community just understand mental health better, how we support people who are suffering, and also about resources in the community. And so when you see somebody in crisis, what do you do? And that's kind of what we'll be talking about for that. And so because mental health is an important part of our mission here, we're going to have that workshop here on the 23rd at 7. You can be in person or online, and feel free to invite anyone. Maybe they don't come to church, but maybe they're interested in that. It'll be open to everybody. So looking forward to that. And then we have our June 11th day of the Middletown Pride March. That's going to be the second annual march in the area that's led by the youth who have been in conversation with, and I was happy to open up the church for that date for us to provide dessert and beverages. So whatever ways you want to participate, you can feel free to come here. You can feel free to walk or march, or maybe you just want to hang out at the church and greet folks along the way. Whatever you want. We're excited that we're going to be able to participate that day. And then June 18th, there is going to be a march with the Poor People's Campaign, which I also included in the email. That's a faith-based organizing group that often addresses issues of racism and income inequality, and just want to open up the opportunity. It's something that I'm involved with, a couple other clergy are involved with, and just relay it to our congregations, relay it to the people we're in relationship with. And so if anybody wants to join that in whatever ways make sense, maybe it's a donation, maybe it's coming down to DC with us, you can get on a bus with us and we can go. And all those links are in the email. And I'll keep sending it out so you can stay connected. Any other announcements? Yes.
Having a clothing giveaway Wednesday, 11th, from
Yeah.
9 to 11, and we can volunteer.
Yes, so clothing drive this week, it's gonna be outside from 9 to 11.
Do you need clothes or are you guys full of clothes?
We're expecting a donation, I have to come to us. But I think we're doing it.
Yeah, we're
But
gonna,
yeah, it's getting close. Perfectly summer and spring. They're bringing this winter clothes and nobody's taking it.
So right now.
Yeah.
I could use Coke today.
yes. Yes, usually when there's a clothing drive, it means we have a lot of stuff. But it also means that sometimes we don't always get like the right seasonal stuff. So yeah, just checking in with that. And yeah, if there's anybody who wants to stop by or on Wednesday, we will be having that. And I think that's all, if there's not anything else, but that was a lot. And hopefully the emails help you keep up with dates. Awesome. Okay. So now feel free to join with me either in body or spirit for the call to worship. And so it says, all who are weary or heavy laden, come and dwell in the presence of God. We come with our grief, our anger, our fear, and our doubt, trusting all is welcome here. All who hunger for justice, the risen Christ calls, come and follow. We come to hear and proclaim the good news that sets us free. All who believe that love is yet alive, come and feel the Spirit stirring. We come open to the miraculous and unexpected. God has gathered us in that we might be renewed together. So let us worship with thanks and praise. And our first song is Holy, 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 and the lyrics are in the bulletin.
That would not be a resurrection.
Holy, 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 Lord God Almighty, early in the morning, our song shall rise to thee. Holy, time where we come in our service where we have the opportunity to share our joys and concerns with one another. As the Bible says, we bear with one another in joy and even in grief. And so are there any joys or concerns today?
I'd like to lift up all those people
We have to
for
talk
whom,
about. Gotta wait,
Give us the mic.
for all those people who either don't have a mother or Mother's Day triggers trauma for them,
Mhm.
and also a good friend who just lost her mother just yesterday,
Mm,
and her name is Shelley, and I lift her and her family up.
absolutely.
I'm also very joyful to have Emily with me and my mother, who I'll be seeing at the church.
Awesome. So yeah, joy and a concern. Welcome, Emily. It's good to see you again, and grateful for the plans after the service. Say thank you, Jesus, for those. And we also recognize that Mother's Day is a complicated day. It's a really hard day to navigate as a pastor, as a church. You want to lift it up and also realize that it brings up so many feelings for people. And so we do remember those who have lost their mothers, those who have lost children, those who are separated, those who have complicated relationships. We say, Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer. And also lifting up Shelley as well, who just lost her mother. Yeah.
So on that same kind of note, and it's also the birth too, it's complicated for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
My oldest son, he turns 25 this week. So
Mm.
my first.
Yes. Yes, we celebrate with you and say thank you, Jesus, for the celebration of birthdays and new life.
I mean, it's pretty a bunch of miracles too, since I'm 32.
Yes, of course.
It's a miracle.
The miracle of 32-year-old mom. Yes, absolutely.
I just want to share the joy that I feel this week for this church and for the people in this church who have been so responsive to people who are in sorrow and people who have trouble. It just amazes me the empathy and the love that is in our church.
Hmm.
Just want to celebrate that today.
Absolutely. Thank you for lifting that up. Yeah, we're grateful to be part of a community. We affirm that we were made for a community, and how great is it when it's healthy and loving, and that we can come alongside each other, whether we're good, whether we're not so good. So thank you, Jesus, for community. Yeah, Barbara.
I have one blessing. I did have some skin cancer removed this week, 4 spots, but it was good. It was not melanoma, which one spot looked like it was, but it turned out not to be. So, okay. And today is the anniversary of my first husband's death. He died on Mother's Day. We were 2 young babies, so it's always a tough day. It's the actual day. It's Mother's Day night that he passed suddenly. So tough day.
Mm-hmm.
My kids luckily are were raised to be good people, and they are today. So I have a blessing for that.
Absolutely. Yeah, we thank Jesus for just good news that you are doing okay, that you were able to get those things removed. And also, yeah, lifting you up as you remember this day and all that it holds, and all the grief that it can bring up for you, and loss. And so we say, Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer. Any others? Okay. All right. Well, please join me in prayer. Gracious and loving God, we come to you humbly today, grateful that we are able to hold so many different emotions that have come up. mainly because you do, and you model for us the ability to rejoice just as often as we join one another in sorrow and in grief. We are grateful for this day for so many reasons. The mothers that have mothered us, the people in our lives that have blessed and nurtured and protected us, and for all the ways that you have built us for a relationship and the ways that we have grown and been taken care of throughout our lives, whether that was a mother, whether that was people who acted in that role for us. We are grateful for the ways that the relationships we have in this life point us to you, in the ways that you bless us with those relationships. God, we also recognize that this is a difficult day for many of us to navigate as we are seeking and discerning the best ways to support folks who, for many, this day is not a good day. For many of us, it is a reminder of what has been lost. It's a reminder of what has been estranged. It's a reminder of the complexities of relationships. That are created in so many different ways through birth and through adoption and all of the ways that relationships ebb and flow. Some of our relationships with mothers are complicated. Some mothers are not able to see their children today because of distance, some because of incarceration, some because of separation, some because of violence. And so, God, we just lift up any of the feelings that could come up this day. We ask that you comfort those who grieve and mourn, that you protect those, that you give strength. Not for those of us who are celebrating or recognizing in various ways, that you would increase our joy, that you would be beside us, that you would hold our hands in whatever this day brings. Maybe it's many emotions at once, but be with those especially who are grieving anniversaries. There's been a lot of those in our community. We ask that you be with those who are struggling in body and in spirit. We pray for this world that though we have a day to honor mothers in so many ways, we still have a world that makes it so difficult and so scary to mother. So we just pray that we might be a part of ushering in a world where all can be safe and all can have choice and all can live in abundance. And we recognize too those who suffer with mental illness this month. We ask you to comfort and heal those among us and those we love who experience various mental health challenges. We know that at times their suffering is great and isolation can seem unbearable. Those who experience the highs and lows of mood swings bring healing, and for those who find it difficult to cope with tasks of everyday living, bring healing and peace. God of great gifts, thank you for the courage of those who live and survive among us. We lament for the discrimination and stigma that still exists and the lack of access to care and treatment. And we pray that you would grant us hope in being a community that is full of care and trust. Give us wisdom and insight as a church, as a community, as a society, to be places that bring healing. In Christ's name, amen. So as we come now to the scripture reading, the message today, the passage comes from Acts chapter 9, verses 36 through 43. And it reads these words. Now in Joppa, there was a disciple whose name was Tabitha, which in Greek is Dorcas. She was devoted to good works and acts of charity. At that time, she became ill and died. When they had washed her, they laid her in a room upstairs. And since Lydia was near Joppa, the disciples who heard that Peter was there sent 2 men to him with the request, "Please come to us without delay." So Peter got up and went with them. And when he arrived, they took him to the room upstairs. All the widows stood beside him, weeping and showing tunics and other clothing that Dorcas had made while she was with them. Peter put all of them outside, and then he knelt down and prayed. He turned to the body and said, "Tabitha, get up." Then she opened her eyes, and seeing Peter, she sat up. He gave her his hand and helped her up. Then calling the saints and widows, he showed her to be alive. This became known throughout Joppa, and many believed in the Lord. Meanwhile, he stayed in Joppa for some time with a certain Simon, a tanner. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. And so the scripture this morning is called the burden of strength, a resurrection. And I shared this image, which I thought was really beautiful, that I shared last night, of this Tabitha person that we don't often talk about too much, but yeah, I hope we can learn from her story and her life, and also the questions that arise. So as this chapter opens, things are looking really great right now for the early followers of Jesus. There are, at this point, rumors of Jesus's resurrection spreading all over the place. The movement is growing all over the region. Lives are being transformed, people are being healed. The Holy Spirit is filling Jesus's followers everywhere with passion and strength. And Acts describes how the young church seems to be prospering wonderfully. But in today's story, we are reminded that even as the early church experiences success and growth, it cannot escape heartache. And so many of us could say the same, because 2,000 years later, God is expanding the church in nearly every corner of the world. People are receiving grace in big and small churches, new and old churches, even struggling churches. 2,000 years later, people are still preaching the word, communion is being served. Christians are learning how to better support those who suffer. And yet physical and mental illness continue to wreak great havoc, even in the biggest and fastest growing churches. The death and mourning and crying and pain that will have no place in the new creation still seem to flourish in God's current one. And so as people of faith, our emotions often swing wildly between joy and sorrow, from grief to gladness, because in so many ways, things among us still are not what they should be. And so maybe it's not so weird then that in the midst of resurrection joy, we are smacked by a story that opens with the reality of sudden death. Though it is short, the passage is vivid, hardly masking the deep sorrow and loss of those who care and grieve. The author begins by naming Tabitha. Her Greek name is Dorcas, and we do not know much about Tabitha. The Bible doesn't state whether she's single or married or widowed, rich or poor, or whether she had children. We don't know her genealogy, but her dual names likely suggest that she was maybe straddling the cultural lines between Judaism and the wider Greco-Roman world. But most importantly, she is named as a disciple, the only feminine form of the word used in the whole Bible. And she is the only woman in the whole Bible who is labeled as a disciple. The only one. And other than that, we only come to know about Tabitha because of her death. She is remembered as a person of deep creativity and faith. The author recalls her good works and acts of charity. In Joppa, every believer knew her works and thanked God for this disciple. However, after an apparently short illness, Tabitha's boundless capacity for ministry drains away. She dies, plunging the entire community into profound grief. And the people who grieve for her the most are the widows around her. In her day, widows were the people who languished on the very bottom rung of society. They were the poorest of the poor. When women lost people in that society, that often meant they lost status, no one to protect them, no one to represent them, no one to provide for them. They were vulnerable and forgotten. And yet these are the people who testify, who witness Tabitha's life. They remember that Tabitha provided for them, advocated for them, gave them hope. And so still in shock, this community grasps for any hope and they cry out in desperation. They call for Peter and they are eager to show him the garments that she made for them. And then whether or not they expected it or not, once Peter clears out the room and prays at the bedside, his words are simple. Tabitha, get up. And all of a sudden, any decay that had happened in her somehow reverses itself. The neurons refire and she is alive. Pretty nice ending, I guess. Cool. But of course, this is too easy of an ending, right? Because I like to complicate things. I mean, one, obviously we don't all get to experience this kind of resurrection, right? And how much so many of us would love to. But there's also other questions raised that the text doesn't answer for us, like it just feels too simple. I would love to know, for example, like if Tabitha could speak for herself, because she doesn't even speak at all, like what would she have said about her life and her experiences? I wonder, how did she experience living in a patriarchal culture? Did she take care of herself? What were the effects of her endless generosity on her mind and body? It's why earlier this week I was stopped in my tracks because I was researching about this passage and I was looking online and I saw this profound question about Tabitha, which was just, did she even want to get up? Because let's be real. I think her legacy is beautiful. And yet we know that even though she is named a disciple, we can assume that she often did her work under the table, under the radar, without being acknowledged or given a title like her male counterparts. And then even as she is named, the burden of being first often comes with this expectation of being a role model for those that follow. Such an honor and responsibility also does not mean that there were not others before her and after her who also were disciples, who were ignored and went invisible. And so like, I want to talk to Tabitha and I want to ask her, was that ever something that weighed on you? The burden of being first. And I also want to know more about her experience as a selfless giver. Like for her, what did it mean to be remembered as being full of good works? I have no doubt that she probably found her work profoundly fulfilling. I imagine that she loved to help, loved to nurture, that she was good at it. And so many of us are also gifted in this way. But does this mean that Tabitha's entire life was dedicated to others, even at the expense of her own health? Could that have been the case? Because often churches rely on the persistent work of a few women, women who are convinced to never complain or say no. Did Tabitha expend all her time and resources and energy for the benefit of others at the expense of her own well-being? Like, I want to ask her, was it ever a lot to hold? Was it something that you prayed about alone at night? Did you ever get a break? Did you have a burdened soul? Did your body collapse under the weight of the world? And so there's just a big part of me that wonders, did she want to get up? I wonder if she was really, really tired. And these are worthwhile questions to ask too, as we think about how things have not changed much in our own culture. I think about how much women I've known have been expected to carry child rearing and jobs and households, and sometimes even whole churches, often with little authority, for less recognition and less compensation. And there was a recent Forbes article that showed that more than half of women now experience rising stress levels and burnout as their normal workplace experience. They are reporting higher rates of mental health challenges and are leaving jobs at alarming rates. And then still, not all women experience these things in the same ways. It's one thing to draw strength from outside of oneself, from finding purpose in God and from people and things to meet life's challenges. But I think about all the ways that this kind of thing affects different types of women. Like in the Black community, for example, the expectation to constantly remain strong is quite another thing than just doing good works. According to womanist scholar Dr. Shaniqua Walker Barnes, the strong Black woman is someone who rarely or ever says no or complains. Everyone depends on her to step in when things go wrong. She rarely asks for help. She often feels compelled to serve others endlessly. She is not expected to break down, but remains an example of strength, even in the most painful circumstances. And so, unfortunately, others rarely hear her cries because they expect her to be able to handle it. She becomes less than human and often crumbles under the weight. This is what the scholar describes the burden of strength. And so the questions around Tabitha point our attention to all of the added challenges experienced by women of color, including mothers and queer women and immigrant women and disabled women and incarcerated women and women who are poor. And not even just women, but all gender minorities, trans people and non-binary people who carry these added stressors and layers of invisibility and violence. And so it makes me wonder, like, when I read this story, what kind of world are we running when we decide that we should work our most vulnerable people to death? When we begin hammering away at people's rights, when we begin taking away people's ability to choose what they do with their own bodies, when we do not believe people's stories of abuse and violation, I just wonder if Tabitha was tired. Was she lonely? Was she angry? Was it so much to hold, this burden of strength and this burden of giving and this burden of mothering the whole world and this burden of being poured out like a drink offering? Did she ever stop to fill her own cup? Did anyone ever check on her? Did she regularly take deep breaths? Did she unclench her jaw? Did anyone give her places to rest? And yet we sit in this reality that even in the midst of all these questions, her story ends with being risen from the dead. Just like Jesus said to Lazarus, "Come forth." And just like God raised Jesus from the tomb, Peter says, "Tabitha, get up." And the power of death over her crumbles and she sits up again. She is joined to the people who loved her in life and in death. And somehow, some way, I believe that power still exists today. A gospel that looks out over a death-dealing world, a world that expects us to hold it all and do it all, and yet declares that eternal life is the new order of the day. That no oppressive force can ever break us apart from each other. In ways we do not all expect, we are reminded that God still speaks life into dead places. But most importantly, that God makes us live beside still waters, that God restores weary souls, that God's yoke is easy and burden is light. We are reminded that resurrection in Christ is whole and complete, leading us into abundant life, not weary or tired life. Which means that even misrepresentation and invisibility and exploitation and even extreme self-denial do not have the final say over our lives. So maybe we could imagine together, what does resurrected life look like for the weary soul? For folks on the streets tired of marching ban off our bodies. For people trying to forge a way for themselves in church and healthcare and in the workplace. And what does resurrected life look like for mothers who are tired and fed up? For mothers who are grieving, for mothers extending support and love to everyone except themselves. Like, I wish I could just ask Tabitha. I would ask her if maybe resurrection for all of these people is actually power to say no, power to ask for help, power to be honest about one's own emotional capacity. Maybe for people like Tabitha, resurrected life is power to stand up for one's own dignity and well-being, power to set boundaries, power to live a life that is full of self-care, even as we care for others. Maybe for people like Tabitha, resurrected life is also power to slow down, power to take a nap, power to cry and let it all out. Power to make mistakes, power to extend love to oneself, power to nurture one's own sense of peace and joy. And perhaps resurrection for people like Tabitha is to realize that Christ already died, which means you don't need to sacrifice yourself on any altar. Tabitha, get up, Peter says. We don't need to live under these burdens any longer. Of course, the story doesn't answer all of our questions. For those of us who grieve, we wonder when our resurrection experiences will happen, physically, if not in other ways. We recognize that as death continues to be around us, it can be hard to hear stories like this one. But every now and then we get a glimpse of someone like Tabitha, a woman who surely faced her own battles against the patriarchy of her day, one of the few women in the scriptures who offers someone for us to look to. She is a site of struggle for those who use the Bible to bash based on gender. She is a stunning example of discipleship and how much impact we can have on those around us. Her story helps others come alive, and yet, if we aren't careful, she is also a harsh reminder that we desperately need to protect the givers and the strong ones among us. She is a reminder that we need to hear stories about rest and joy and spaces of honesty so that we do not crumble under the weight. Can resurrected life for us also be freedom to put your phone off? Can it be freedom to be unavailable sometimes? It's why you'll always hear me celebrate when people take naps. You'll hear me cheer when people take days off and when they take vacations. And it's why you'll often hear me say, yes, you should eat that cookie. Yes, you should buy those shoes. It's not because I believe in overindulgence, but most of the people I know are people who just give everything. And so you'll often hear me say these things: treat yourself, take a break, give yourself a break. Tabitha reminds us of the danger of a story that is only about how we've offered it all. Every single day, systems of all kinds work on our souls and bodies and attempt to steer us towards death, attempt to work us. And we need one another in order to turn back to life. And so through our acts of remembrance, through paying attention to the glimpses of God in ourselves and others, God can work wonders. So let this be a message. You don't have to be strong all the time. You don't have to carry the world's burdens. You don't have to be worked into the ground. There is rest and still waters here. Jesus already died, so you don't have to. This is also resurrected life. Amen. I invite you now to share, if you would like, how this message is moving in you.
There's a lot to think about, but the other thing, as you were saying all that, some of the stuff you said at the beginning, I was thinking about you being the only person, the only woman recognized as a disciple.
Mm-hmm.
Then you will also wonder in her picture you created, we don't really know when she's dead.
Mm-hmm.
But my presumption is that she experienced something in that time. But would hope.
Mm-hmm.
So did she come back energized?
Mm-hmm.
Did she come back with something to give to those widows? Something to say about this isn't the place you're in now. Don't worry about it because
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be better later.
Yeah.
So did she come back with hope? Peter was not a baker.
Be a natural. I got mine.
Yeah. Cookie and naps, yes.
Like Bart, we talked about the power that we can get from Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And many of us have lived with religious oppression.
Mm.
And even in churches where we've been active, still have, we take upon ourselves guilt, feeling like we're not praising the Lord like we should, or we're not doing enough, or whatever.
Yeah.
But to me, it's religious oppression.
Mm-hmm.
However we look at it, that's what it is. And we oppress ourselves.
Yeah.
And so for women to have that power, take a nap, to be able to speak up when things aren't right, to feel empowered that they can speak up against oppression in this country, because many women are feeling that in their marriages and especially today with this abortion thing. I just think that has just filled women with that feeling of being oppressed again. The other thing I wanted to say was the freedom to feel that we in this church cannot allow anyone to feel invisible.
Mm.
You know, that's an empowerment we can have when we greet people and when we share with people. No one here ever has to feel invisible. And I know I felt invisible in churches.
Mm.
So I just feel like this is what I'm called to do. To make sure that every person that I meet, that they are never going to feel invisible.
Yeah.
Because that's what Christ wants me to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Judy, for just lifting up the reality of religious oppression. I have been wanting to preach this message for a long time. I never felt like the time was right, but I do feel like this is how so many of us are trained, is to celebrate all the ways that we deny ourselves, the way that we give ourselves away, but not too often about the effects of that, and about, we are Easter people, we are resurrected people, and so it can't be a life that that consistently leads us to be weary and tired and exhausted that we are called to. So I appreciate you lifting that up. And yeah, also just the ways that we can still be empowered to say no, to take the nap, whatever it is, to be whole people so that we can give and be well enough to give. So yeah, I appreciate that. Any others? Yeah.
So
Tiff.
I feel that Tabitha's story is kind of like a lot of, like, it reminds me of my best friend, right?
Mhm.
She works, she's a mother, she has a household, she has a husband and everything, and she's tired.
Mhm.
And when she tries to take a nap, there's a Paul that's saying, get up, you got something else to do. So did Tabitha really want to get up, or did she just want to kind of sleep? So,
It makes you wonder. Yeah. But of course, I like to ask too many questions. So I'm always just like, is that really what she wanted? But I think for so many people that is their experience of being drawn in so many different directions, having so many roles to play. And, we also are good at it, right? But just making sure that it's not at the expense of ourselves feels like, a radical act against the religious oppression that many of us have lived under, which is that we should just give, no questions asked.
I do think the other thing that's probably been more spoken of,
Mhm.
John, is the fact that probably that was in there so that it could be the recognition that Peter raised somebody from the dead.
Yeah.
I mean, and certainly the power to be able to do that was given to him is important, but at the same time, in tradition, that's just more of the man part of it, right? Is even when it happened.
Yeah.
He got the recognition. He stayed in town and he did,
Yeah. That's a good point. I hadn't thought about that aspect of it, but it's very true. I mean, the way these things are written, it's still almost as if her story is about Peter's victory.
So I
And
appreciate you bringing it, bringing and asking those questions. That's the beauty of being 2,000 years later is ongoing.
yeah, I appreciate that a lot. I think that's why I ask the questions I do, because I feel like the way that the stories are given to us, even the fact that it's just her death and being raised from the dead, I'm like, that erases so much of who she is, and we don't even get to hear from her what it was like. So yeah, I want us to think about those things that the text doesn't flat out tell us. Yeah.
One of the things I've been thinking about, and as we're thinking, was the society's expectations in general, and how so many of those still exist today, 2,000 years later. And I'm a teacher, and I work in a middle school, and we've been talking actually in my class about gender roles and stereotypes and expectations. And it's interesting because the word stereotype, it's a very new word for most of them. They understand the concept, but they've never understood that. Well, is this something we were talking last week? Is this something you're born with or something you learn? And for them, that's like, wait, what? And it was interesting. This girl shared this story about how she was like upstairs with her brother, and then her mom called her down to help her clean. And she's like, well, why didn't you call my brother down? And she was like, that was when I realized that I'm treated differently than my brother. And having these these seeing it in the students' eyes as they're realizing not just what it is, but what does it look like.
Yeah.
And so we continue to grapple with this as not only, are we treated differently, but like, how do we respond to that? Like, what do we do with that information? And in some ways it saddens me that these things are still existing, although we've come so far, even in the past 30, 50 years.
Yeah.
But even things like political climate things, it's just a continual reminder of that there still has to be change. And that for Tabitha, like, even though she was probably an exception to many rules in her society, there's still so much further that she has to come because the story is still told from a male perspective. So that's what
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, I'm not sure that we always are like at least taught to like see those parallels between like the expectations and how they still exist. I think in many ways, like we have the benefit of hindsight. We can say like, well, we've made some progress and we don't all have to like do the things that women did. And like, as you're saying, it still exists in so many ways. And sometimes even just shows up in the guilt that we feel when we're not able to like fulfill all the roles that people say we're supposed to do. And so, yeah, I'm grateful that you're doing that work with kids. That's
It's a
amazing.
lot of fun.
Fun and all the things,
All
I'm
the
sure.
questions they have. I'm just loving that you're having that conversation.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
really cool.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about my son is a perfect example. I raised him, he had to clean his room, he had to learn how to cook.
Equal opportunity abuser. Right here. We all had to do it all.
So, I mean, that was very important when I was raising my kids. I wanted them all to be self-sufficient.
Mhm.
But my son has been married twice. His first wife cleaned and cooked. His second wife cleaned and cooked. Now he's engaged. And he's cooking and cleaning.
Mm.
So there is hope.
Yeah. Yes.
He's also retired now, so he's got no.
And she cooks too.
They
They share their duties, and to me, it's just such an eye opener because I think about, 35 years ago when he was first married,
Yeah.
and his young wife, just her mother cooked, she cooked, it was just the way you did things,
Yeah.
That makes Cindy go.
I-
I'll cook, but we'll go there on.
Yes.
It's a give and take, as the guy's thing was always got the trash. That was always the big thing.
Right.
That's like a man's job. Like, that's the easiest thing in the world. You clean the dishes, I'll get the trash. Hold the can.
Yeah, exactly. There's so many examples of the ways that it shows up. And so, yeah, those parallels are all things that I, want to continue challenging about the text and about our own world. Barbara, I think you had your hand.
Yeah, I thank you for that message today. It hit home, especially on Mother's Day, I think. And for myself, being a widow, not once but twice, and my mom passed away right after my wedding day, and she was ill, and so I became like the matriarch of the family, trying to keep the family together. And then still with 2 young babies, and still trying to keep all my siblings together. It was a job that you give, and then when I became sick, it was like, come on, you still got to get up and keep us together. It was like, how much more can you give? And they just keep expecting, and it just becomes, come on, guys, so seeing Tabitha, it was like, wow, and you get tired. Come on, guys, you just get tired, and you're like, how much longer can I keep doing this? And the questions that you bring up is amazing, because you just keep questioning. You think, wow, could she have not wanted to be resurrected? I've gotten to the point like, gee, do I want to wake up? And I'm tired of doing this and trying to keep everybody together. And are they appreciating what I'm doing? And if I don't do one thing, they criticize. It's like, well, I've been doing it all along. And, but yeah, so very important thoughts brought out today by every one of you, and it's just amazing. But one quick point, I saw this in a store this week, and I thought it was apropos for all of us. It says, don't tell God that you have a big problem. Tell your problem that you have a big God.
That's cute.
I just
Yeah.
wanted to share that because I think we've all shared our problems with all of us. And I never saw this.
Yeah.
I just thought it was a message that I just want to share with everybody. I thought it was so apropos for all of us.
I love that. Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate that, Barbara. I think, you are someone who gives a lot, and the way that you offer yourself and even your story, I know that you're so meaningful to so many people, and I'm glad that you were able to see yourself in Tabitha in many of the ways that like all of us are, and just hope that we can be easy on ourselves, and hope that this space my ministry and our ministry together can be an opportunity to sort of start separating the voices that we hear, the expectations of the world versus the expectations that are actually from God, that are telling us what life is. And so it's not easy, but the questions begin the journey. So thank you. Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much for your reflections. Is there anybody on Zoom that wants to share?
I don't see anybody.
Okay.
Maybe.
Okay, just wanted to ask. Awesome. Well, thank you.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
It's Susan, and I love your message today. Thank you very much. And I am on my way up to see my mama. So it was a really, really good message. And I'm crying as I'm driving. So thank you. Thank you.
We miss you and we appreciate you. Happy Mother's Day.
This is Carla as well. I just something in the
Thank
chat.
you. Same to you all.
Go ahead, Carla.
No, I just wanted to echo what Susan said, that it was an amazing, intriguing, and powerful message. So thank you. I just can't be there in person today, but I did put that in the chat. I wasn't sure if we were going to open up the lines on the Zoom.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, Carla put in the chat, this is amazing, intriguing, and powerful message and discussion. Thank you. I see Allison's on here. I'm not sure if you want to share, but just wanted to open it up. Okay. But I'm really grateful for
People's engagement with this text. I always feel like I'm taking a risk with some of these things, but I just felt like it was the thing on my heart for Mother's Day. And I just feel like when I think about my life, I've been raised with strong women, raised with and by strong women, and in so many ways love and appreciate that, and also know so many of them who bared the weight of that, and how much they also suffered under the weight. And so hope that we can hold things in tension as we hold together virtue and strength, and also how we take care of ourselves. So thank you again for your engagement. And so as we listen to these messages, a lot of times it causes us to reflect on our lives and ways we want to grow and change and challenge each other and ourselves. And so confession gives us the opportunity to lift up together those things to God and to one another. And so in this spirit, let us say the prayer of confession together. Gracious God, source of all life, we have rushed around and now we are exhausted. Our need for rest is so important, but we have let plans and schedules crowd in, shouting their demands on our time and energies. We come before you in need of healing, the healing of our bodies and souls, the healing of our relationships, the healing of our pride and fear and apathy. We know that with you, nothing is impossible. Forgive us when we follow those paths that do not lead to life and lead instead to violence or hate or fear. Paths that lead to dread and death. Forgive us when we forget that you offer us life, life that is abundant. Heal us so that we will be free to serve and love and dream and be as Christ calls us. Amen. And so hear this good news that the true God will lead us into places of hope and resurrection. God will give us the waters of life to strengthen us. God will be with us in every moment, in every place of our lives. There is healing and rest here. We are all forgiven and loved for the rest of our days. Amen. And as part of this abundant life, this life of still waters and peace, we are invited each week to this table to receive God's abundant love and grace. And as we continue through the Easter season, as we reflect on resurrection, Scripture tells us that on that first Easter morning, the women went to the tomb and found it empty. They returned to the disciples and told them what they had heard and seen, but Peter was the only one to believe them. Text said that Peter got up and ran to the tomb. And sometimes that's how I come to this table, praying with every step, running to get here, desperate to feel something holy, praying I'll see Jesus around every corner. And then there's other times my spirit is heavy, maybe like Tabitha's, and I find myself slowly returning to this table. So no matter how you feel today, whether you're running to get here, whether you are desperate and hungry for a spiritual experience, whether you're doubtful and moving slowly, know that there is room for you here. This table is an expansive table. There is food for everyone, love for everyone. There is no scarcity here because this is God's table. So all are welcome. And as we receive from God, we also offer ourselves. So if you should feel led to give your offering here in person rather than online, you can bring it forward here as you receive bread and cup. Know that your gifts are helping to build a world where all have lives that are filled to the brim, where all are welcomed, fed, loved, and known. And might we add, where all also can find rest. So please pray with me. God of the garden, God of new life, God of the here and now, where do we begin? Our hearts are full to the brim today with gratitude, hope, fear, doubt, dreams, and beliefs. As a result, our prayers can often feel chaotic at best, bouncing around to each name and need that comes to mind. So settle us, excavate us, summon out what we shall be. Lift our prayers from the rubble of our distracted minds and hold us close. God, there are some things we would like to let go of, things we'd like to bury, things that we do not want to bring with us into this new day. In particular, we'd like to let go of our stress and fatigue. We'd like to let go of our own self-criticism and fear that we might not have or be enough. And these things are always easier said than done, God, which is why we need you. And at the same time, there are things we'd like to hold close, things that draw us closer to that resurrected life you dream for us, things we are running towards. In particular, we want to move closer to balance and to meaningful relationships, to health of mind, body, and spirit, to justice efforts that set our hearts on fire, and to your example lived out in our daily lives. And together we say, we return now to the example of Jesus, who when he was up against the threats of danger, oppression, and scarcity, returned to God, trusting in abundance. On the night in which he was betrayed, Jesus took bread, blessed it, gave it to his disciples, and said, "Take, eat. This is my body, which is given for you." Then Jesus took the cup, raised it to heaven, and said, "This cup is the new covenant. Drink this in remembrance of me." So God, help us today, guide the way, meet us in the garden again, roll back the stones that stop us, gather us up into your expansive love, until that promised day when swords are beaten into plowshares and the prayers of the people are only prayers of joy. We ask that you pour out your spirit on this bread and cup so that we might catch a glimpse of you here at this table. Amen. So now all are welcome to come forward to receive bread and cup as you are able. So now I trust that as we are partaking together, we will join in our final song, which is "All Who Are Thirsty," and the lyrics are in your bulletin.
All who are thirsty, all who are weak, come to the fountain, dip your heart in the stream of the life, the pain and the sorrow, be washed away, the waves of His mercy, as the deep cries out to thee, we sing, come, Lord Jesus, come, Lord Jesus, come, Lord Jesus, come, Lord Jesus, and all who are thirsty, and all who are weak, come to the fountain, dip your heart in the streams of life, let the pain and the sorrow be washed away, the waves of His mercy, as deep cries out to thee, we sing, come, Lord Jesus, come, won't you come, my Lord, come, Lord Jesus, come, come, Lord Jesus, come, Lord Jesus, come, Holy Spirit, come, Holy Spirit, come, Holy Spirit, Holy Spirit, as deep cries out to thee, as deep cries out to thee, as deep cries out to thee, we sing, come, Lord Jesus, come, won't you come, won't you come, Lord, come, Lord Jesus, come, oh, come, Lord Jesus, Spirit of the bride, say,
Amen. And so I'm grateful for all of you who are here, everyone on Zoom, everyone who will join in later, just for this community and ways that we're able to be radically honest with each other. And so I just send you out on this Mother's Day to just hold the story of Tabitha in your heart, both the wonderful example she was, as well as the ways that she challenges us to rest and to protect those around us who are givers and strong. And that may that rest and peace that Jesus offers lead us into more abundant life. Amen.
Yep. All good. Thank you. Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.